Thank you, Kim. Let me just say that I don't think that this is the time to add to the rhetoric and to pump up the volume on this particular debate, tempting as it may be. Already it appears that this debate and discussion that we should be having is getting well out of hand. I'm thinking of this morning's report, an action by a government minister which can only be described as unwelcome, undemocratic, and unbecoming. Attempts to muzzle, coerce, and intimidate people into positions with respect to the municipality reform. Have they gone mad? Do the rest of us need to go mad? No, this is not a time for that. We need less heat and more light and an opportunity to engage in discourse and sober reflection. Look, this act has been tabled now for less than a week. And when it was tabled, the minister responsible said that he hoped it would lead to a round of meaningful discussion. What discussions, I ask? With whom? Where? And when? There's been nothing. This invitation was no invitation really at all. Now we know the corporation and the government have issues. We're all well aware of that and of the issues. But what about letting the rest of us in on this debate? It's not just the members of the opposition who've been shut out to this point, but the public as well. And we are expected to consider, analyze, and come to a view on what's proposed within a week. That is hardly, on anyone's view, reasonable. The rest of us have not had the benefit of the study by the consultants, the $800,000 consultants, which the cabinet has had, and maybe their caucus too. I don't know, leaks notwithstanding. But we should, and so should the public, so that they can consider all the issues and all the options. We've not had the opportunity to discuss this openly and rationally. And up until the bill was tabled, there was nothing to discuss. All the information and what was being considered was being kept secret. Even answer parliamentary questions. Now, the way government has chosen to proceed with this particular bill and on this issue is, in our view, so unnecessary and unhelpful. It's a classic case, unfortunately, of sowing seeds of division rather than dialogue. And in an area where, as Kim said, there is common ground and widespread agreement that there ought to be municipal reform. I ask this question, what's the rush anyhow? We're told that the bill isn't to become effective until April Fool's Day 2011. What's the rush? I'm only asking, can someone give us an answer to that? And one other thing before I close, lest someone think, as I'm sure we'll be accused of, this is not a ruse or a trick to defeat reform. It's really a plea on behalf of the community, for the rest of Bermuda, to have an opportunity to come in on this debate. There are some weighty issues, important issues to be considered here. I'll give you two. When this was first announced over a year ago, the minister who was then in charge stood up in Parliament and said, and I've got the statement in front of me, we've got a request for proposal, and we're looking for proposals for the oversight, management, and implementation of the integration of the municipalities of Bermuda into the government of Bermuda within 1 year. Has that objective changed? We don't know. We've got a bill before us. Is that the beginning of the end when you're taking away their finances? I'm only asking, and give us time to consider. And look, this is a 1923 act. It's crying out for reform and change and modernization. But there are more issues than the ones that are contained in this piece of legislation that are before us. And indeed, what this bill purports to do, in my view, doesn't satisfactorily address what it does raise for consideration. I can give you some examples. When it comes to elections, it says, well, we'll use the Parliamentary Election Act. Well, hang on a minute. Should we continue to have the same numbers of people being elected? Is that necessary? Should they be part-time, full-time? Should they be paid? These are questions for consideration. And elections, should they be fixed and prescribed by statute? Just asking. And then you move on to things like their power to make ordinances and to raise money, whether by way of taxes. Is that something that really ought to be approved and continue to be approved by Parliament and not just made by the city? That ought to be addressed as part of municipal reform. And then there's the whole question of their finance. If you are going to take away their ability to raise funds through wharfage and port dues, we know what services the city does provide. They give, by the way, full and complete audits every year, and they're sharing it publicly. There's no question about that. What are they supposed to do as a result? All of these issues need to be addressed. They're not even addressed in this piece of legislation here. And in my view, it is clearly a rushed piece of legislation. For what purpose? For whose benefit? I ask. All I'm doing is just asking.